Hi, Chrissy from Truly Holistic. One thing I pride about myself here at Truly Holistic is the fact that we simplify things. Now, a lot of things in our life, a lot of things about the world aren't complex in their original nature. It's the fact that we make it complex through the creative process we use to perceive and process reality. When we generally, humanity, we are all of us in the same boat, that we are conditioned to follow what we see and then use a thought process to get our head around what we're observing and what we're experiencing, which I term a mind thought pathway that we use to perceive and process reality as our discernment of that. Now, the byproduct of that is we make things more complex than they are. We compartmentalize it. We become very cerebral and analytical about what we're observing and hence how we respond to that. And we tend to make things more complex than they should be. Now, one thing I want to bring forth in this video is DNA. DNA at its core is not complex, it's simple. So I'm going to provide my perspective as an intuitive quantum healer, reality coach to simplify DNA. Because the thing is, when we get into Heartfield, there's another pathway we can use to perceive and process reality that is more in line with what we authentically are. And a great benefit of it is also it simplifies. And it's very much connected to the expression, right? To get to the heart of the matter. And when we get to the heart of the matter, it's just to get to the origin, to the authenticity of what we're observing, what we're experiencing. So we have a greater insight into what it represents, right? And this is what humanity is generally missing at the moment, right? We live in a world with infinite sources of information, but we're more confused and conflicted than we've ever been because we don't need more information. We need greater insights into what it all means and what it represents. What's the purpose of it? The heart will bring that. A heart-filled pathway will bring that, not mind thought. So I'm going to give you a heart-feel perspective about what DNA is. Now, a big thing, if you really want to break down the simplicity of anything, but at the same time get to the heart of the matter through simplicity, is through symbology. Okay, when we look at sacred geometry, things like this, very connected to symbology. Okay, and sacred geometry or geometry is the word form, and that's actually where the word information comes from. Okay, so we're seeing these forms in formation as part of our life, but we just have that greater insight into what it represents. Now, so I'm going to use that approach with DNA. So when we look at DNA, right, we see this helical structure, right? So two strands that are helical. Now those two strands that are helical is a vortex. And vortex is the form, geometry of flow. And anybody that's done session work with me, whether we're doing clearing work or we're doing reality coaching session, will understand that that word comes up a lot. We focus on that a lot, this aspect of flow, because it's essential to everything. Why? Because the form or geometry of flow is a vortex. And we see that geometry everywhere as part of reality. Now, so that's a vortex, right? So when we see that helical structure, it's a vortex, okay? Now, if we were looking down the line of that vortex, like it's vortexing through a confined space, like let's say a pipe, and if we were looking down there, we'd see a spiral geometry. Okay, so that's where spiral geometry comes from. So when we look at DNA and we look at the helical structure, okay, it's a vortex, hence its flow. It's the carrier wave of that coding, which is called nucleotides in DNA, that's bound within it, right? So that vortex, that helical structure, is the carrier wave of that information, that coding, okay? So we know the two strands, the helical structure, and now the nucleotides that contained within that helical structure is simply how you're programmed, all right? It's the coding. Okay, so we can see it as frequencies. So that's a simple approach to DNA. That's all you need to know. Now, for me, the big question though when it comes to DNA, okay, is because that emphasizes flow, us being in the flow, living our life in the flow, enabling our physiology to be a representation of flow, right? Just like Bruce Lee said back in the day, be like water, friend. And what he means is by saying be a representation of flow. Because water is the physical embodiment of the flow, okay? But we can apply that to ourselves in the way that we go about our life. If we go about our life in a very flow manner, that then becomes the precursor, the state, that then the body will follow. So the physiology, whether it's blood flow, whether it's lymph flow, whether it's putting food down one end and then coming out the other end in regards to the digestive system, it's all to do with flow. Urinary system, creating urine and then secreting it out, flow. Neurons communicating to other neurons, nervous system, flow. So the body depends on flow, and we know at Truly Holistic that illness is caused by either a congestion, obstruction, or blockage to flow. So flow is essential in all aspects of your existence in the way that you apply yourself, okay? Now, so the key question to DNA is then, if DNA is, okay, the helical structure is the carrier wave, right, the vortex, the flow of that coding, that frequencies, that information, then that's how you become programmed, right, as a human, as you're here. So the quick key question is, who is the programmer? Okay. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there are two pathways. There is mind-thought, that we can use to perceive and process reality, or heart-feel. Now, the heart and the mind, the only thing they have in common is they are access points for an intelligence or consciousness to be here. And they're here because all consciousness must evolve itself, okay? And they use this body we perceive in the 3D as a body, which is a less than a 1% representation of what it authentically is, because our visible sight doesn't go beyond 0.0035%, is really an interface for a consciousness, which is energy at its core, it's frequency, right? Going back to the coding, right? DNA, the programming to code through the body, through the interface, to extend its will here, to expand itself. And what we find is that the intelligence that comes through the mind is not the same as the intelligence that comes through the heart. And the seat of the soul, okay, is the heart. And that's what you authentically are, the soul. This is why we know when we are more in a heart-filled pathway and we sit in the heart, we're in the flow. And we present a state of flow to the body, which is beneficial to keep it in a well and vital state. Okay, when people are more mind-orientated up here, we become very cerebral and analytical, we congest our flow, we dam our flow, we can't be in the flow. So hence our body gets congested, obstructed, and blocked, and we see all the accumulation of stuff happening in the body, which then becomes illness. So it's all connected, right, in relevance to this, but I wanted to give you some greater insights into such a thing as DNA, and just to break it down in a more simple approach. Hope you really enjoyed this video. Remember, if you want to book an appointment with me, go to trulyholistic.net/appointments/. Catch you later.